We are kicking off episode 587 of the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear with a song. Savage Season is the name of the song. It comes from the band the Bradipos 4. It's from their self-titled album from High Tide Recordings. They, of course, gave us permission to play their music here on the show. Make sure you check out the Bradipos 4 when you're done listening to this episode of Monster Kid Radio, and when you're done listening to the conversation that I'm having with Bryan Clark about a kaiju film. We're going to get our Gamera on, Gamera versus Gyaos. I had a really good time recording with Bryan. I've recorded with Bryan in the past, but it's been way too long. So it was great to have him back on the show to talk about, well, this very special kaiju film. Special to him, and I think it's going to be special to me too in the long run. Either way, it was a great recording, and I had a great time with Bryan. I hope that comes through in the conversation that you're about to hear. Of course, it wouldn't be an episode of Monster Kid Radio if not for all the great segments that we have coming in. We've got Kenny's look at famous monsters of Filmland, where he's going to talk about, well, famous monsters of Filmland. And we've got Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review. And I said something about this last time. I want to say it again. Mark is knocking it out of the park, and this is the 100th contribution that he's made to the show. 100 reviews of Ultraman and kaiju goodness from Mark Matzke. Big shout out to Mark for that. It means a lot. Thank you for being part of the show. Thanks to Kenny as well. And of course, thanks to you. And thanks to Mike R., who sent in an email. He wrote in, "Hey Derek, yesterday on the Monster Kid Movie Club, just before I had technical difficulties, an episode of One Step Beyond played for about 1 minute after the episode to know the end. When you restarted it, it was a different episode, so I had the replay loop on, and when the episode was over, I hoped to see the one which briefly played, and it was on. And not only that, 5 more unseen episodes followed. I'm so glad I stayed up to catch them, even though in my time zone that meant staying up until 2:15 a.m. Great selection. Mike, thank you. I appreciate the email. If you want to be cool like Mike, you can email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail. Of course, we do have a voicemail line. I'll go over that here in a second. And I'm not just riffing for time because I don't have it in front of me and I'm looking it up. The voicemail line is 360-524-2484. You can always call and leave us a voicemail or send us an audio file. Mike, thank you for writing in, and thanks for watching the Monster Kid Movie Club. That's the Twitch stream, our Twitch channel, the twitch.tv/monsterkidradio. We're always showing stuff there. I've got replay loops going of the big shows, the big show happening on Saturday, and hopefully this comes out in time for you to be able to make arrangements to make sure you join us for Frankenstein Day in the Twitch stream. And if you're a subscriber to the channel, you have an opportunity to win something. And we have a Frankenstein giveaway lined up with Stuffed with Character. That's all happening later on, though. Let's get through this episode first. Let's get through the conversation with Bryan, the Kenny's look at famous monsters of Filmland, and of course, the 100th Beta Capsule review with Mark Matzke coming up right now.
You shall pay, Black Prince. I curse you with my name. You shall be Blackula.
Blackula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Blackula, Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he. Blackula, he thirsts for your blood, he hungers for your soul, more horrifying than Dracula. The Black Avenger, Blackula, an American international release, rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
I am Dr. Lee Cushing. Welcome to my Chamber of Horrors.
Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors is a serialized monster rally novel in the tradition of the classic Universal and Hammer horror films. It's written by Stephen D. Sullivan, the award-winning author of White Zombie, Daikaiju Attack, Manos: The Hands of Fate, and the original Chill role-playing game.
My goal is to recreate the thrills of the Monster vs. Monster films that we all love. We'll have vampires, werewolves, mummies, psychic twins, and scheming madmen. And that's just in the first storyline.
Now you can get Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors and other monster stories sent directly to your email for as little as $1 a month. For just $2, you'll get all the chapters in advance, plus bonus stories and other perks. Sign up now at CushingHorrors.com or visit sdsullivan.com for a Patreon link.
I do hope you've enjoyed your visit. Please come again. And remember, the chamber is always waiting for its next victim.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. What defense can be mustered against a legion of undead shadow people? That's the question at the heart of Ultra 7 Episode 33, entitled The Invading Dead. Captain Kiriyama and a TDF submarine detail are transporting highly classified, top-secret documents detailing the whereabouts of every Defense Force base in the world. Their mission is successful, at least initially, but word soon reaches them of the inexplicable appearance of zombie-like men stumbling into confrontations with the Ultra Guard. The zombies are brought back to TDF headquarters where, despite efforts to revive them, they expire. In a macabre twist, shadow figures issue from the corpses, steal the microfilm containing the TDF base locations, and transmit the information to a relay station in Tokyo. Dan becomes Ultra 7 to stop them, but with little effort they shrink him down small enough to be trapped under a drinking glass, and continue with their plan. The signal sent by the Shadow Men reaches a fleet of flying saucers which are primed to attack the TDF outposts. The Ultra Guard must rescue Dan and intercept the invasion if they hope to preserve the terrestrial defense force. The Invading Dead is a supremely enjoyable episode of Ultra 7 due to a genuinely creepy scenario which is creatively shot and expertly paced under the directorial eye of Hajime Tsuburaya. Only later does one realize that there was no kaiju to speak of. The alien-controlled zombie shadow people are more than enough of a threat. And that's not all. The flying saucer leading the invasion comes uniquely equipped to apprehend Ultra 7, to the degree that it seems like the whole scheme was meant to lure our hero into alien clutches. It's an ominous sign that 7 is perceived as a threat to be eliminated, and it's a theme that will only gain momentum in the final third of this classic series. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Action hits. Here are the 7 wonders of the world rolled into one fantastic adventure. Frankenstein, born again to rule in terror, a monster unleashed to conquer all who stand in his destructive path. Frankenstein Conquers the World stars Nick Adams as the American scientist versus Frankenstein incarnate with the strength of 1,000 men, a phenomenon such as never seen before. See Frankenstein Conquers the World, astounding on the giant screen, also on the same program. Tarzan, man of the jungle, with only a lion, a leopard, and a chimp as his army. Can they conquer the hired killers of the dealer in death? Cy Weintraub presents Tarzan and the Valley of Gold, with Mike Henry and Nancy Kovac in Panavision and color from American International Pictures.
Nothing can stop it.
The Blob.
Starring Steve McQueen.
It creeps.
It crawls.
It's slithery.
It's slimy.
The Blob.
Plus Dinosaurus, both in shrieking color.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radioheads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of Filmland. Today we are back in Japan watching kaiju again For this segment, I am going to share the audio of the first part of my Twitch stream epic look at kaiju in FM. In it, you will hear about the first and only mention of Gamera and Ultraman in Famous Monsters. After you have heard about it, you will want to see it, so make sure you click on the link in the show notes to watch the history of kaiju in Famous Monsters. Now, let's go back to 2020 and hear about famous firsts. Konnichiwa, kaiju fans. This is Kenny from Monster Kid Radio with a look at famous monsters of Filmland. We are going to see the history of kaiju and famous monsters in this multi-part series. Let's start with famous firsts. The first mention of a monster imported from Japan was this photo from Half Human, found in Famous Monsters No. 1 from February of 1958. Not quite a kaiju, but close. In issue 2, from September of 1958, we find the first mention of a kaiju film in an article about future monster movies. Have you noticed that creatures are getting more colorful than ever? How about those starfish-shaped things from the stars with a big eye in their middle, the Mysterians? It seems they were confusing warning from space with the Mysterians in this case. Our old friend Godzilla was first mentioned in the same article in this list of films from 1956. In 1956, there were 40 science fiction and fantastic picks, many of them featuring monsters such as Blaisdell's Beast with a Million Eyes, Marla English as the seaweedy she-creature, Bud Westmore's Mole People with their warty heads and knobby hands, the Goonish Gamma People, the monstrous Godzilla from Japan, the three-eyed mutant in The Day the World Ended, and the oozing horror that was the creeping unknown. In FM3, we see the first mention of an upcoming Godzilla film in this list of future flicks, Godzilla Raids Again. In FM6, from February of 1960, we see the first giant kaiju photo published. This look at the robot from the Mysterians. It's the great aunt of Robbie the Robot. Gee, Annie, what a long nose you have. By Jimmy, it looks like the nozzle of Schnozzle. In the same issue, we see our first Japanese FM fan, Tokyo Trio. Father Tetsuyano, son Makoto, and daughter Kumiko all enjoy FM in Japan, the country that gave us Godzilla, Gigantus, Rodan, the H-Man, the Mysterians, and the return of Madame Butterfly. The first picture of the Big G didn't come till FM9 from November of 1960. Here's a monster who's well-trained. You guessed it, Godzilla. The first and only looks at Ultraman and Gamera was in FM 128 from September of 1976. When Japanese monsters fight, it's a bite to the finish because they just keep on nipping at each other. You too will find plenty to sink your teeth into in this exciting new issue. What was the first movie to receive article-length coverage? We'll see that next segment. For MKR, this is Kenny saying sayonara.
The Mysterian! The Mysterian! The Mysterian! You are now inside a flying saucer. Our destination, the planet Earth. We are the Mysterian. Our race is old, dying, our planet dead. Only you of Earth, you and your women, can give us life. And what we want, we take. Swooping down from outer space, flowing up from the lower depths, the Mysterians. Creatures who knew the uttermost secrets of the atom before our planet was born. Love-hungry spacemen come to seize our women that their dying race may live. It started in the east. Soon it swept the west. The all-out horror of interplanetary war. See giant robots no earthly weapon can destroy rip a path of destruction across the land. See the forces of nature harnessed to the invader's will wipe entire cities from the face of the world. See the earth itself crumble beneath your feet. The Mysterians, threatening our civilization with weapons beyond the belief of modern science. Flying ray guns that blast everything before them. An impregnable fortress that hides in the earth. Gamma rays that melt the heaviest armament. As men and machines disintegrate before your eyes. The Mysterians. What power can stop their ruthless advance? See the blazing holocaust of an earth gone mad. See on the giant screen in flaming color. The Mysterians.
adventure and excitement to stagger the imagination. The fantastic fire monsters raging out of the flaming bowels of hell. Mighty Gigantus, crushing whole cities in its wrath. And deadly Anguirus, screaming its challenge of mortal combat. The Battle of the Ages, scenes and sights and sensations beyond anything the screen has ever shown.
I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome to the podcast devoted to the classic, and sometimes not so classic, genre cinema of yesteryear. And I offer you this warning. Sometimes Derek and his guests get excited, and they may spoil a movie or two. You know how excited monster kids can get sometimes. If Monster Kid Radio spoils a movie for you, do not come whining to me. I cannot stand whines.
Listeners, I don't talk about kaiju enough. I feel like kaiju is one of those subgenres, the Godzillas, the Gameras, and all the rest. It's one of those subgenres that I could rabbit hole and deep dive and just have a good old time talking about this stuff. There are so many podcasts out there that focus specifically on giant monsters, on kaiju, that I don't know if I could do a good enough job on my own. Sure, we get the Beta Capsule review here on the show from Mark Matzke, and that's amazing, and I'm in awe of what he's able to bring to the table. And when a guest wants to discuss a kaiju film on the show, I get a little like, well, I want to, but I don't have the experience, I don't have the knowledge of these films as a lot of people do. Fortunately, I've got incredible friends that come onto the show who are willing to hold my hand and guide me through the kaiju-infested waters. That's a really, really weird metaphor. All of this is to say, I've got Bryan Clark here on the show to talk with us about a Gamera film. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me back. I'm stoked to be here again. It's been a while. We had
It's been a long time.
Had a lot of fun the last time, so.
Been quite some time, and a lot's been going on for you in that. Wow, you are writing for Scream magazine, man.
Yes, yeah, that's been a big change since the last time. In fact, the issue that just came out, number 74, I have an interview with John Carpenter.
Holy cow! How cool is that?
Yeah, that was a thrill, and he was super nice too. You hear so many stories about him being grumpy at conventions or whatever, so I was a little nervous. I'm, kind of a fledgling reporter, cub reporter for the Daily Planet kind of thing, and approaching, one of the great legends of horror. And man, he could not have been nicer. There were some technical snafus during the interview process, and the recording got screwed up a little bit. And he was just patient and funny and friendly and warm, and he was great.
Oh, wow, that's so amazing. I've heard a few interviews with him on podcasts over the years, and obviously read a lot too. I'm a big fan of what he does. I would be lying if I didn't say that what John Carpenter did during the 80s and 90s really influenced me as a horror film fan. And your article tackles a movie that I feel like didn't get a lot of love when it first came out. We talked about John Carpenter's Vampires with him. How cool. Man, I'm just trying to imagine you sitting there, part of you just buzzing and freaking out that you're talking to this horror movie master while trying to get the job done and do the interview and put together such a great piece. So congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Now, is writing for Scream Magazine something that is going to be on the regular for you?
Yeah. I've been doing it pretty regularly for a little over 2 years now. They publish every other month, so there's only 5 issues a year. I wish it could be the thing that pays my bills, but that's not going to be the case. But if I didn't give them another piece for the next year and a half, they could put something of mine in every issue and not run out of material. They've got a lot of stuff in the can for me already. Right now I'm working on a piece on the Blob.
Ooh.
And I have...
Which one? The remake or the original?
The original, yeah. That
Oh, nice.
Recently I've done a few more contemporary movies like vampires, and I think that's the newest movie I've written about for them. My first piece was on Son of Kong, and I don't know, I guess the editor gave me a list of movies that he wanted covered and said, here, pick from these. And I guess I must have just kind of got myself pegged the classic horror guy, because most of the stuff I've written about for them has been more MKR adjacent type stuff. So I've done pieces on like a couple of the Mummy sequels. I've done one on Return of the Vampire, Blackula, all kinds of classic stuff.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. And listeners, I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to Scream magazine. I know there are a couple of magazines that use that word as its title, but this is Scream spelled the traditional way magazine. It's billed as the world's #1 horror magazine. I will, again, make sure there's a link in the show notes to go check it out and support Bryan and tell him that Monster Kid Radio sent you. Especially for getting some good Monster Kid type coverage in that magazine. I love when contemporary horror outlets celebrate the classics and do it with respect and knowledge and real love. And that's the vibe that I get from what you do, from your writing. So thank you for representing.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. And they do a good job of representing all eras. And Rich, the editor, is a big fan of the classics. So he makes sure there's representation, and like you said, respectful representation.
Excellent. Well, we could talk about John Carpenter's Vampires, which I haven't seen in a long time, and even reading your piece, I'm like, I really need to go back and rewatch this, because I remember really loving this movie. So I need to go back and rewatch it later, because right now we've got some other things we got to do.
Yes, we do.
We've got a giant monster movie to talk about, but I'm changing things up. I'm going back to how we used to do it. How do you feel about a round of the Classic Five before we get started?
Oh, you're springing on me right out of the gate.
The Classic Five.
Let's get into it. I'm totally ready to completely forget everything I know about every movie I've ever seen as soon as you ask me the first question.
Editing makes us both sound like what we know we're talking about. So
well, that's good. That's good.
All right, here we go for the Classic Five. It is a game that we play on Monster Kid Radio. I have a literal deck of cards. Each one of these cards says this or that. Which movie do you prefer style question on them. There are no wrong answers. Just a way to get Monster Kids talking about their favorite topic, monster movies. Are you ready to play a round of the Classic Five?
Yes, I am.
All right, here we go. Question number one, card number one. Ooh, it's from the Hammer deck. Which movie do you prefer, the Gorgon or the Reptile?
I'm sorry, Joshua Kennedy. I've got to go with the Reptile.
In this remote little country village, the mortal remains of a man are laid to rest.
Who is it this time, Peter? It's Mr. Spaulding. They found him this morning. Just like the others.
Just like the others, he died in the night. Get away from there! Get away! Suddenly, violently, horribly.
This is an evil place. Corrupt and evil.
Evil, as venomous as a snake, turns the quiet of this village into a writhing hell on earth, where every man fears for his safety and his sanity, where everyone is suspect.
What do you mean they died by some sort of magic, some witchcraft?
For the first time in my life, I'm frightened.
Everyone is frightened. The doctor who'd lived his life in the East. This man who could be the next victim. This woman and this girl are frightened, hypnotized by the crawling, creeping spell of the reptile.
Stop! Pack your things, we're leaving.
No, Dr. Franklin. You are not leaving.
I could kill you.
Possibly. But you could never be free then, could you? And what would happen to little Anna then?
Trapped like animals in a cage and getting closer and closer, suffocating them with terror. The Reptile.
The Gorgon, there's some great stuff in there. It's got Patrick Troughton, which I'm always a fan because I'm a huge Doctor Who guy. But yeah, the Reptile has got more atmosphere, I think. It's got Jacqueline Pierce, which, big thumbs up there. The Reptile.
No wrong answers, man. No wrong answers. And I love the reptile. I love the monster design in that. I like the monster of the Gorgon too, but the reptile monster design, man, it's anytime you can take a human being and do something to them to change their humanness, like the shape of them being a person, the reptile totally changes the head, and it's great. So.
Yeah, and I'm still kicking myself for not picking up the Mego figure, because they did a line of Hammer stuff, and the reptile one was fantastic, and I passed on it, and now I wish I hadn't.
I don't know what to say there, because I've been slowly getting rid of a lot of my stuff just to make room for new stuff. But
yeah. I've been trying to
I'd have a hard time getting rid of it if I had that. So.
I've been trying to adopt kind of a, not exactly, but getting closer to a one in, one out kind of thing. So I'm not hoarding quite. So I'll try to sell something on eBay if I want a new piece kind of thing. So I'm not, because I'm completely out of room, but that has not stopped me from buying more stuff. So,
yeah. All right, card number 2. What is your favorite classic monster movie sequel?
Favorite classic monster movie sequel? I think that's going to have to be Son of Frankenstein. That's my favorite Frankenstein movie. I think I might have gotten this question the last time too, because I remember talking about Son of Frankenstein, and I love that one.
Yeah,
it's my favorite Bela performance, and it's fantastic.
20 years ago, in the barony of Frankenstein, a monster created by man stalked through the country, maiming and killing. In time, Frankenstein, maker of the monster, died. The monster disappeared. Now, after 20 years, the son of Frankenstein returns, and fear grips the village anew. A man tainted by the blood of his father can forget his human soul and carry on the diabolical work of the Frankenstein.
As a man, I should destroy him. But as a scientist, I should do everything in my power to bring him back to conscious life. Benson, turn on the generator.
Produced on a vast scale, Universal Son of Frankenstein presents the most fearsome cast in the history of the screen. Basil Rathbone. In his heart, warm human emotions. In his mind, the monster mania.
It's alive.
Alive, you mean?
Yes, alive.
I thought you said our experiments
I know. I too thought we failed, but we haven't. I've actually seen it walk.
Karloff, rising from the past to spread new terror. Lugosi, sinister, mysterious, evil.
You see that? They hanged me once.
Lionel Atwill, grim hatred in his blood.
One doesn't easily forget, Herr Baron. An arm torn out of the roots.
Josephine Hutchinson, her young beauty a magnet to the menace around her.
I hate it here, Wolf. I'm terribly afraid all the time.
By heaven, I think you're a worse fiend than your father. Where is this monster? Where is he? I'll stay by your side until you confess. And if you don't, I'll feed you to the villagers.
Card number 3. What 2 1950s monster movies would make a great double feature?
Oh boy, 1950s monster movies double feature. Well, I want to take the easy way out and say that since we're talking about kaiju movies, the natural pairing would be The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and the movie that it inspired, the original Godzilla. I would love to see those.
Has that answer ever been given? I don't know if that has, because that does seem like a natural fit.
Yeah. Man, what I would give to see a 35 millimeter film projected double feature of that. Even at a drive-in, maybe. That would be so cool.
Oh, man.
Now I'm making myself want things I can't have.
Well, see, eventually, we just need to figure out a way to own our own drive-in. It's the thing. And show whatever we want, right? That's an attainable goal, isn't it?
That's the dream. I was actually I used to work at a record store, and my boss was a big film fan as well. And he and I had talked pretty seriously to the point of approaching the property owners of taking over a movie theater that was here in town. And he would be the money guy, obviously, because I was like in my 20s at the time. And Not that I have any more money now than I did then, but and then I was going to manage it and program it for him. And but unfortunately, we got shut down, so never even got that one off the ground. But we were really going to try to do it, and it would have been fun. Because it was a 5-screen theater in the mall, so we had this idea. We have all these screens to play with. So one screen can play newer movies, and then you got a screen to like, Sunday afternoon, you got old westerns, like a John Wayne double feature or something for the people who remember doing that in their early days. And
that's gold.
One screen doing a sci-fi double feature, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, or some Harryhausen movie, something like that. One screen playing older Disney films like Lion King and Snow White and something you can bring the kids and let them run around the theater. Friday night, midnight exploitation double features, and just doing all this kind of cool stuff. But yeah, maybe someday.
I used to joke, and I don't know how serious I am about it anymore, but I used to joke that my perfect retirement job would be to own a drive-in movie theater.
Yeah.
And during the non-operational months, because, wherever I live, I'm Pacific Northwest. It rains all the time and occasional snow. So
sure.
During the non-operational months, you have a part of the property that is set up as like a drive-in museum, so that it becomes an educational thing with all the tax write-offs that come with that.
Nice.
To help support the drive-in when it's in operation, because I'm not going to make any money doing a drive-in. I'm going to show the movies that I want to show. I don't, whatever.
All right.
Yeah, and I know it's a niche audience, so he set up the museum part of it for the Anyway,
that's why you get the multiple screens.
That'd be so cool.
You get multiple screens, then you can play one. There's a drive-in not too far from about 2 hours away from where I live. It's a double screener, so one screen on each side of the lot. So you sit facing away from one or the other. So you use one screen to play the classic monster stuff, and then you use one screen to play the more profitable, the stuff that's going to put the cars in the lot kind of thing. So then you can do both.
Exactly. Yep. All right, well, card number 4 from the Kaiju deck, just kind of randomly, they're all shuffled together today. Rodan or Mothra?
Are we asking about the movie or the monster?
When I wrote the question, I don't know, because of how the card is formatted, I'm thinking I was asking just about the monster, but you can take it however you want.
Well, I'm going to have to say, if it's the monster, Rodan, and if it's the movie, Mothra. I love the original 1956 Rodan design. And I don't think they ever got him quite right again until 2019, Godzilla King of the Monsters. That design of him was primo. But I'm not a big fan of the 65 one. I don't like the Heisei one at all. And the Final Wars one is just kind of okay. But that 56 one is perfection. Really, there's only one other flying kaiju that I like more, which we'll be talking about very soon here. But as far as the movie goes, Mothra is just such a beautiful fairy tale film. It's really much more fantasy than science fiction, but it's just gorgeous.
I've been trying to, and she's been very receptive, trying to introduce my girlfriend to a lot of these classic monster films that are important to me. I've since shown her Creature from the Black Lagoon more than once. And she's still with me, so winner.
Yeah.
I've been wondering which kaiju film am I going to introduce her to. She knows that I love Ultraman, so I've been thinking which Ultraman. But as we're sitting here talking, Mothra might be the one. Mothra might be the one to kind of bring her into that magical world, because she loves fantasy.
Yeah.
She loves fairy tales. She loves all that stuff. So Mothra might be it.
Yeah, I think there's your gateway right there.
Yeah. I mean, I did show her the MST3K Gamera song clip on YouTube, so there's that too. So she knows that Gamera is full of meat, and Gamera is really neat. But we're getting closer to talking to Gamera than I'd like right now, because we have one more question to do.
Okay.
One more card. Favorite horror host? I hate it when this question comes up, because I'm inevitably asked to answer, and I can't answer that because I love so many of them, and I'm friends with so many of them. I don't want to pick a favorite.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to honor that for you, buddy. You got to pick one.
My area. No, I know.
Yeah, neither did I.
I don't have that much experience with them, because, like I said, I didn't have one here. So the ones now, I mean, I guess I'm going to give a two-part answer. So favorite horror host, Joe Bob Briggs.
There you go. Okay.
He's an awesome guy. I've got to meet him once, and I'm going to see him again in October on my birthday, which is very cool. My girlfriend Terry got us tickets
how cool
to see
is that?
Joe Bob on my birthday. Yeah. And
nice.
I found out about him on TNT with Monster Vision, so I wasn't there for the earlier stuff, the newspaper column and the movie channel thing, because we didn't have cable growing up. But we got satellite dish, had TNT, watched Monster Vision, and he is most of the reason I write about movies now. Like, he was kind of DVD special features before there was such a thing, because his hosting style was so informative, and it made me realize there was so much more behind these movies than you'd think of just watching them on your own. He'd tell you the history and about the people who made them. And that's what really made me interested in being maybe calling myself a film historian is a little grandiose, but I'm certainly not a critic. I just write about the informative side of it, but so Joe Bob Briggs, he was my introduction to the world of studying exploitation movies as opposed to just watching them. And I'm going to have to give a shout out now to, like I said, I didn't grow up with a horror host, but growing up on our public television station, they showed on Friday nights Doctor Who, which is how I got to love that so much. And that was hosted by a local professor from a community college named Mike Frisbee. And he would perform kind of the same function where he was sitting in a lotus position, floating around against this weird digital, very primitive digital backdrop, because this was, back in the 80s. So it just looked like a Windows screensaver or something like that. And he would give information about the episodes of Doctor Who and talk about the actors and stuff. In fact, that was how I found out that John Pertwee had died. I still distinctly remember that night when I sat down to watch Doctor Who all excited, and he comes on looking all somber, and usually he was pretty jovial and cheerful. And so I have some bad news. I'm sad to report that John Pertwee has passed. And I remember that being the first celebrity death that really kind of punched me in the gut, being so close to home. Dude. So Mike Frisbee on Iowa Public Television hosting Doctor Who, that was awesome.
Wow. I don't know anything about, Doctor Who or Mike Frisbee, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone outside of Northern Iowa probably knows anything about Mike Frisbee. In fact, a friend of mine used to work with his nephew. And I remember talking to him one time, man, your uncle was so cool. He was such a big part of my childhood. His nephew had no idea that he'd done that. Of course, this kid is like 20 years younger than me and didn't care about sci-fi stuff either. But so
nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Well, that was a round of the Classic Five, and you survived. So, good job, I guess. No, you get to be on Monster Kid Radio, so there you go. There's your prize for winning.
Yeah, I did well enough. I didn't get kicked out right after I.
There you go. No, I love the Classic Five. I don't give it the highlight that I used to, but I still love it, and I really do need to make a concerted effort of getting the next round of questions and cards available to people. So, listeners, hold me to that, would you? I think I need the extra foot to the fire to it. So but yeah, that was fun. Thank you for playing around the Classic Five. Let's dive into talking about Gamera, which I think you were about to tell me is one of your favorite flying kaiju.
Well, his opponent, that's who I was referring to. Gamera
there we go. There we go.
Gamera versus Gyaos.
It is the third. Yes, it's the third Gamera film. Gamera versus Gyaos, released in the States with a really weird title, but whatever. Gamera vs. Gyaos is the film we're talking about this week, and I actually watched the Japanese language version of it last night to get ready for this conversation. It has been released, I believe, twice in various dubbed forms over the years, but I did the Japanese subtitled version. How did you watch the film this time?
I also watched the subtitle version. I grew up with the Sandy Frank version. The original, these you were alluding to, there were two different dubs back when AIP was importing tons of foreign movies, Japanese monster movies, Italian Hercules movies, all kinds of things to put on television. Because this movie debuted on television over here. It was never in the theater. AIP commissioned all their dubs to, in-house. A lot of studios did international language versions where they would have usually an outfit in Hong Kong that had English-speaking employees would do them. And a lot of the times they weren't very good. So AIP would get Tetra Studios to do them. So you have all these great voice actors like Paul Frees doing these amazing dubs. And the whole copyright thing, and I know you're a big copyright geek too, is very weird with it, where due to various circumstances, the movies wound up in public domain, but the dubs were still owned by AIP, I believe is how it went. Which is also why when that Criterion Godzilla box set came out and everyone was complaining that it didn't have the dubs, it's because the rights to all the different dubs were scattered hither and yon, and Toho is allergic to, they don't like to be sued themselves. They love suing everybody else. But they didn't know who to get the rights from for the dubs, even though most of them probably aren't, no one would care anymore anyway. But so that's why there are so many movies that they're only subtitled on the Godzilla Criterion box set, is because the dub rights issue was kind of a nightmare. So when the home video market came up in the States, AIP didn't exist anymore. And these movies were up for grabs, but no one knew what to do with these dub versions. So when Sandy Frank came in and bought these movies, the distribution rights to put them on VHS, he had his own dubs done. And that's how most people of our generations got to know the Gamera movies, is through the Sandy Frank dubs.
My original exposure, and I believe they used the Sandy Frank dubs, was MST3K.
Yep. In fact, when they did Mighty Jack, they even made up a song about Sandy Frank.
That's right. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. And I've recently talked a little bit more about my thoughts about MST3K on the show, and it's constantly going back and forth when it comes to Mystery Science Theater. Is it disrespectful? Is it okay? Do people enjoy it? Does it create an atmosphere of just derision? I don't know what the answer is, and I will someday have that big Monster Kid Radio Mystery Science Theater roundtable. Someday.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what got us. That's kind of what got us talking about that in the first place. Is I messaged you saying, "Hey, I'd love to be part of that as a member of the defense."
And I know that, and I've talked to people like you, Scott Morris in particular has really, he and I have talked a lot about MST3K over the years privately, because I know he is a huge fan. So people like Scott who love this stuff, their exposure to a lot of these classic sci-fi films came from MST3K and turned him into the monster kid that he is now. So I know it can be used for good.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the things choices of movies that you were talking about on a previous episode, where especially when they got to the Sci-Fi Channel years and when they did the movie, that they were using these great Universal things, that wasn't their choice. That was a studio mandate. They didn't want to do this Island Earth either. Universal Studios said, we own this movie, here, make fun of this one. And they all went, but this is good. And then the studio said, well, you do this or you don't get to do a movie. So, they kind of had a gun to their head. But
yeah, and I don't blame them for that. I don't blame the people that are involved for it at all. Everybody's got to get work, got to get paid doing what they do. And, if I was given a paycheck and said, okay, sit down and riff on this movie, I would have a hard time saying no.
Yeah.
Well, I get it.
And at their best, they especially during the Joel era, it got a little meaner when Mike became the host, but at their best, they punch up. A lot of the, if you listen to, and they do get into jibing on the movies a little bit. In fact, they do it some in the Gamera ones, where they'll say, oh, that's a toy or whatever. But for the most part, the riffs aren't mocking the movie. They're either making a reference like, oh, this person looks like this other character, or it's another way to engage with the material, and they're not necessarily tearing it down. It's just an added layer of communication with the movie. I have a buddy who could explain this better than me because he's a PhD and he wrote his thesis on riffing. So, but
how cool is that?
I've learned a lot about it from him too. So
that's a really good point. Punching up as opposed to punching down. You're right. But this isn't the MST3K panel. Someday that'll happen. Someday.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe I'll pitch it as a panel at a future convention or something to get myself invited to. We'll see. We'll talk about that later someday. What was your first exposure? Was it through something like that? Or was it through the television?
No, it was also through the Sandy Frank dubs. But do you remember KB Toys? The toy store? Did they have those?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we had one in our mall here in Mason City, and one day the store had sprouted this giant cardboard tub out front full of VHS tapes. And most of them were the Sandy Frank Gamera dubs. And I don't know if you've seen the VHS covers of these old ones or if you had any when you were younger, but they had...
I didn't know.
I don't know if they were painted or if they were photos that had some kind of effect on them, but they looked painted. These really cool, colorful, lively covers with all these exciting taglines, very wrestling tagline type things on them. And so, of course, I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, probably, maybe 7, when I saw this. So as a little kid, you see this bin full of super colorful monster movie tapes, and I just lost my mind. So, yeah, I got a bunch of those. And in fact, I don't think this was my first one. I think my first one was Gamera versus Zegra, but Gamera versus Gyaos was probably second.
Very cool. This is the third film in the series, that all said. And I was pleasantly surprised. I've watched all the Gamera films since I decided I love kaiju movies, which I've talked about in the show as well. My journey with kaiju and not really growing up with them and not really becoming a fan until after I started Monster Kid Radio, really. So I'd seen them all since. So I sat down to watch this time around, and I was quite taken by how much depth there is really to this story. I think when you think about Gamera, at least surface level, it's like Godzilla, but for even younger kids. It's got this kind of kiddie fair kind of scent or stink, I guess, for lack of a better term. This one actually has some pretty cool, interesting things happening. And as I get older and I revisit some of these movies, I find myself really drawn toward the monster movies that have a little bit more going for them other than, here's a monster. Look how cool the monster is. Now, that's important. Don't get me wrong. But this has got this whole villagers trying to keep their home from being overrun by a construction company that wants to run a freeway through them. Oh, wait a minute. It's not because they want to save their home. Really, the villagers just want more money. So there's this kind of really interesting story happening here. And it's a story about making more money in a country that we don't necessarily associate with a lot of rampant, greedy capitalism, the way that you do about, like, say, American exploitation or monster. It's just really interesting stuff. Yeah, you've got the kid running around and Godzilla saves, I'm sorry, not Godzilla, and Gamera saves a child. Sure. You've got the Timmy factor, I suppose, even though he's not named Timmy. But there's still so much more to it than that. And I was really taken by that this time around. Yeah.
And that is, the movie's a little bit propaganda-y in that way, because there's a lot of, everyone, when they think about kaiju movies having a meaning, of course, goes back to the original Godzilla, and naturally so. But most of them have a little more material from the cultural zeitgeist than do American monster movies. Of course, we had all the atomic bug movies and stuff, but most of them were radiation is cool, right, guys? Because, of course, we were the ones with the bomb, so we were promoting that. But so in Toyota and Nissan, I promise this is going somewhere. It's not going to turn into the car podcast. I had
Good,
started,
because,
had started manufacturing newer, smaller, more affordable cars in the 1950s, and they kind of changed the way Japanese people viewed travel. Suddenly it was affordable for people to go more than a couple of miles away from their homes, right? And other companies followed suit, and suddenly everyone had access to these cars, but only about half the roads in the country were paved in the mid 50s. Or in early 50s, excuse me. So in 1952, something was passed called the Act on Special Measures Concerning Road Construction and Improvement. It's a very long title, basically saying we're going to make your roads better and we're going to pay for it with tolls. And so it allowed municipal agencies to borrow enough money to start creating new freeways. And the idea was that once the roads were done, they would put these toll stations up and they would pay back the loans. Well, a lot of them were still under construction when the movie came out, and the debt wasn't even paid off until 1990. So the road construction thing was a big national concern at the time. This is going on all over the country. So that's where the road construction thing comes from. It wasn't just we need a random reason for there to be people out in these woods and confront the monster. That was how that came up. And the whole thing about the farmers being greedy, that's the part that's kind of a little bit of propaganda. So another big current event going on at the time of the movie would be going into production in 1966 was the construction of Narita Airport.
Okay.
The plan was made public in 66, and it was immediately met with resistance. The government planned to eminent domain a bunch of farmers off their land. Now, some of these farmers, some of the land had been given to their families in recognition of their service in the war. So it was,
oh no,
here's this land. Thank you so much for your service. And then 20 years, 15 years later, oh, by the way, we're going to take it all back and bulldoze it under to make this airport. And so there were a bunch of leftist movements that also opposed it because they saw it as opening the country up to more capitalism. So you've got these groups of student activists and these farmers who are getting kicked off their land teaming up together. There was a group called the Sanrizuka Shibayama Union to oppose the airport. There were several other groups, one called the Zengakuren. Actually, the union to oppose the airport was still active even up till 1983. And the Zengakuren, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, and I apologize for anyone listening who can speak Japanese properly. That had been around since the 40s. So they came to help the farmers fight for their land. They were setting up roadblocks. They even built catapults to shoot firebombs at the police who were trying to break their union lines. In fact, 3 police died during the eminent domain process as a result of these conflicts.
Oh my goodness.
So for better or for worse, the airport won. The farmers did all lose their homes, and nobody was eaten by a 200-foot tall bat. But so yeah, that was, so there's all this cultural and political stuff that, that going on back in the 60s that an American audience seeing it in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, we're not going to be aware of. But, and this is what I was talking about with Joe Bob, inspiring me to want to look deeper into the behind the scenes stuff and what's going on and what informs these movies. Because you find all this stuff out. And like you said, suddenly this children's movie has so much more depth to it.
This is one of the things that I love about not just monster movies in general, but classic cinema. Growing up, I wasn't like, oh, I like history. I like learning, you're a kid. You don't care about this stuff. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I didn't. But as I've gotten older, I get more and more interested in history and why things happen the way that they did and the historical, sociological stuff going on and all that. And this is one of the things that I love about classic monster movies and just classic cinema in general is that, yes, it's a story. Yes, it's a monster movie. Yes, it's a fun romp, whatever. But it's also like this weird kind of documentary where you can kind of see what was going on in the area, what was important, the social norms, the mores, the controversies, the history. I love learning about that. And I had no idea about this whole history of what you were just discussing. It really paints this film in a different light for me. It presents this in a different way to me because, again, I went into it thinking, all right, we're going to watch Gamera. He's going to save a kid somewhere and some monsters are going to fight. It is so much more than that. And even just hearing this makes me respect this movie even more.
Yeah. And Noriaki Yuasa, who is the director of all of the Showa Gameras except for Baragon, he did want these to be children's movies first and foremost, but obviously when a current event is something as big as what we were just talking about is happening, it's going to inform a lot of the art of the time, even if, decades later, it's not something people really think about anymore. But Noriaki Yuasa still, like, he was a big kid at heart. I would imagine Kyle Yount probably told the story of him and his son Tiger meeting Noriaki at G-Fest the first year they went, when Tiger was just a baby, and he was in a Giron costume crawling around on the floor in the costume parade, and Yuasa got down on the floor and crawled around with him pretending to be Gamera, because he was just that kind of guy. And so that, these movies definitely do have, it's weird, they have a lighter children's feel, and yet they're so much more violent than the Godzilla movies too, because both monsters bleed copiously in this movie.
That was one of the things that I didn't remember when I sat down to watch this, is that just how gruesome this gets for the kind of movie you think you're about to watch. Because there is, people are getting eaten, characters that you think might be a main character or a hero type, nope, they get off pretty easily. Gamera almost gets his hand cut off, and it's not just a, boom, we're going to fight and we have this one wound. It's an over and over and over again, close up, zoom in, show that he's bleeding a lot. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, and that towards the end, he bites into Gyaos' neck and blood starts squirting out of his ear. That's so gross.
It's crazy. Crazy.
But
I feel like I just cut you off, though. You were about to say something.
I was going to say, for anyone who hasn't seen this or is unfamiliar with it, we kind of dove into the backstory without saying much about the movie up front. There's a road construction crew wanting to come through and take a bunch of these farmers' land, and there's earthquakes in the area. Mount Fuji has erupted, drawing Gamera back to Japan because he likes to eat flames and bathe in lava. And and the earthquakes near the road construction area unleash this giant vampire bat creature named Gyaos, who tries to eat this little kid, and Gamera comes to his rescue. And then throughout the movie, they discovered that Gyaos's weakness is he can't turn his head, which they do come up with a pretty good reason for, because he's got essentially a tuning fork in his throat that produces his sonic cutting ray. So they come up with this really cool plan to make him dizzy until Gamera can finish him off. So they build this big, well, they don't build the tower. It's a hotel with a revolving restaurant on the top, and they put a big tank of fake blood, because obviously Gyaos likes to eat people, on top of the hotel and draw him to it. And while he's sitting there drinking, they turn on the revolving restaurant thing and spin him around until he can't see straight, and then Gamera drags him into a volcano.
That's the movie. There's some hijinks with a couple of the construction workers. There's a couple of guys that felt like one half of a Jerry and Martin knockoff and one half of an Abbott and Costello knockoff mixed together. So there's a little bit of that. Not a lot, but there's enough that, like, they're the only two construction workers that stick around. Whether it's their choice or not, they're there. You've got this little kid that he names Gyaos. He comes up with the name. In fact, they're having this meeting. You talked about the presentation. They show how Gyaos works and his internal structure, his biology, which I thought was kind of cool to see. But that whole meeting practically starts with the kid at the top of the front of the table, kind of explaining what's going on, and the scientists are all paying very close attention and listening and making sure they understand what this kid is saying. It's kind of cool, and I can see as a kid feeling like, all right, this movie's including me on the same level as it would a grown-up. And I thought that was a neat little touch too.
Yeah. Oh, and that is totally intentional. Noriaki Yuasa hated scenes of scientists and military people discussing monsters in these movies, because he referred to them as the grown-up scenes. And he knew all the kids were bored and running around the theater yelling or buying snacks in the lobby or whatever during those, which is why Gamera versus Baragon, which eliminated the kiddie movie factor, didn't do so well in the box office. So when that one failed, they brought Yuasa back and were like, okay, just do your thing. And he felt that giant monsters aren't logical. You shouldn't expect logic in the movies. So we don't want all these scientists explaining everything. He wanted the children in the audience to join the characters in thinking up solutions. And because he knew, kids kind of think of adults as clueless liars, which we are in large part. And so he wanted the kids to be the ones to come up with the solutions. Although there is an interesting thing, and I noticed this time, and I'd never noticed it before, when Dr. Aoki is pointing out the tuning fork thing in the artist rendering of Gyaos. Down at the bottom, there's a little bit of writing that says Rhamphorhynchoidea monster supposed image by Dr. Aoki, which kind of suggests that Gyaos might have been a pterosaur like Rodan at some point in the writing stage. I never noticed this, but I just happened to see it. It's like, oh, there's some writing down there. I wonder if I can see it. And, blurry old VHS tape I watched when I was a kid, you'd never be able to pick that out.
No, not at all.
But these wonderful new Aero video high def transfers, it's clear as day. So I was looking at that thinking, well, Gyaos is obviously a bat. He's not a Rhamphorhynchus, but maybe that was the idea at one point. Although I've heard from multiple different places that this is kind of a response to Toho's Frankenstein movie. Daiei thought, well, they did really well with their taking a Western classic horror monster and turning him into a kaiju. So this is kind of Dracula with the serial number filed off.
I had read a couple of places. I did a little bit of prep work for our conversation, and I guess it never really occurred to me, it drinks blood, but I guess it never really occurred to me Dracula, vampire. It looks like a bat, and maybe I was being dense, but it's a bat, it drinks blood. So yeah, I could see vampire bat there, but I guess I never really thought about that. But that makes sense. When did Frankenstein Conquers the World come out?
65 or 66? I think it was 65.
Okay. And this came out 67. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. Interesting. And I could see it for sure. I do think it's a cool villain, a cool monster for Gamera to fight. You'd said earlier, it's the only one that comes back, right? It's the only one that we see more of in various iterations of the film. We don't really see a lot of the other Gamera foes turn back up. And it's an iconic, striking-looking beast. I love that they come up with a reason why it has no neck.
Yeah.
And I don't know what came first, the decision to not give it a neck, or they built it, realized they didn't have a neck. It's like, how do we justify that? Either way, it works.
Well, many of the suits were pretty stiff and couldn't turn their neck, so I think it might have just been a way to explain that and give them a reason to do the cool spinning blood hotel thing. But yeah, the suits were just like...
Spinning blood hotel thing. There we go. I like it.
That's my new goth rock band LP coming out.
Spinning Blood Hotel sounds like a great band title.
But yeah, the suits were just really stiff, so I would imagine it was explaining that away. There, I do love, though, kind of going back to Yuasa saying that you shouldn't expect logic from a monster. At one point, in that conference, somebody's asking Dr. Aoki, well, what is it? Where did it come from? And he's like, I don't know. Let's just call it a monster. And just blows the guy off completely. Like, who knows and who cares? We need to get rid of it, so let's go.
You talk about like the kid element too. There are some goofier moments in this.
Oh yeah.
Kid logic, I suppose. The helicopter getting cut in half, but specifically, there's a car that's driving, and Gyaos, who can shoot these ultrasonic beams that are strong enough to almost cut off Gamera's hand, cuts the vehicle directly down the middle as it's driving, and it's such a clean cut that half the car can still drive away.
And you can see the little wheel
it's kid logic, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and part of the reason that looks so goofy, that car was a Toyota Corolla, which had just launched in 1966, and that was their flagship car. It was the newest, coolest thing, and that cut in half model was a display thing. Like I can't remember, it was at some big car show or something. So that was some real product placement right there.
I could see that. And in some of the shots, afterwards, after the car separates and it's like, hey, get in this part and we'll drive off. You can tell that the one half is on a stand, but yeah, who cares? It's this kid logic that, well, the car still works. I love it. I love it. And I think it makes, for a fun movie, this movie, despite the blood, despite the gruesomeness in spots, it's just kind of fun overall. I really enjoyed it.
There are other kaiju movies that are more horrific, like, again, the original Godzilla, or more recently Shin Godzilla. But I think this comes closest, even more so than Frankenstein Conquers the World, to like a gothic kaiju horror. It's just a great Halloween atmosphere kind of a movie. And there were parts of it that, and so much of it being shot, all of the creature effects were in the dark, and they came up with a good reason for that. Well, shooting in darkness is better for effects because it hides some things that bright lighting would maybe show as being a little deficient. But there's
it's the equivalent of shooting monsters in rain scenes in the 90s.
Right.
It's why Jurassic Park is all on a rainy night to hide all the issues. Yeah.
But they came up with a good reason. Well, Gyaos is nocturnal, so of course all the monster scenes are going to be at night. But I think most of them are really good. Like, the effects in this movie are great. You talked about before, Gyaos is such a cool design. He's my favorite flying kaiju, hands down. The original Gyaos. And like you said, he's iconic. He comes back. You see him again in Gamera versus Giron, spray painted silver as Space Gyaos. He comes back in the 90s movies. And unlike the Toho movies where you had Ishiro Honda directing the drama scenes and Eiji Tsuburaya directing the special effects, most Toho sci-fi movies had two directors, so you had a completely different person handling the effects. Well, for the Gamera movies, Noriaki Yuasa did both. And I think that is, especially in this movie, really works in the film's favor, because they blend together a lot better. Like, Gyaos' first appearance is so well done, and it's really aided by Naoyuki Abe, who played Eiichi, the little kid. He really sells how scared he is when he sees Gyaos' head, and you don't see him all at once at first. You see him lifted, that reporter guy gets lifted up, and you see a claw, and you see some teeth, and then that crevice opens up, and you see Gyaos, just the top of his head bobbing up over it, and the little kid gets his foot stuck in a log, because, of course he does, and can't get away, and so Gyaos is coming to menace him, and the kid seems genuinely terrified, and having the director be able to direct the kid and know exactly how that effect shot is going to line up to it just makes that blending super effective. Now, even today, that reminds me of some very vivid nightmares I used to have as a kid, of kaiju chasing after me, of looming over the house, looking in the windows while I tried to hide behind the furniture so they couldn't see me and know I was in there. I grew up on a farm, so our house was, way out in the country, surrounded by open fields, and in the Midwest, our big natural disaster, force of nature kind of thing is tornadoes. So I'd have these nightmares of seeing a kaiju walking across the field toward the house, this implacable, unstoppable thing that was coming to get me. And that, of course, ties into the fear of the bad weather and the tornadoes, and really drives home that the kaiju are forces of nature. And that green light and the weird noise when Gyaos is around, he almost has like some kind of electromagnetic force that knocks out small appliances, I guess. That scene where Eiichi wakes up after dreaming of Gamera healing himself down at the bottom of the lake, and the TV is just on the fritz with that weird green light coming out of it, making that strange noise. That was another aspect of the whole thunderstorm and tornado thing, where it would knock out the TV and it would go all static, and the radio would be making weird noises, and the sky would turn green or yellow if it was going to hail. And that just all, I don't know, it's a very primal thing for me, I guess, remembering all these things from my childhood. And so even today, there's little bits of this movie. I'm not saying I was hiding behind my chair while watching Gamera versus Gyaos last week, but it can still call up those feelings.
Well, that, I think, is what makes it such a strong movie. I mean, I think sometimes it's easy, and maybe you can do it with this one too. I don't know. Put in a Godzilla or Gamera film or whatever, and just have it going on in the background and watch the Godzilla scenes and the giant monster scenes, and that's fun. But there's a little bit more going on here, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed this one myself. It gets listed on a lot of lists of, the best Gamera film, the best Gamera sequel, that sort of thing, and I could see that.
Yeah, I
think it's probably my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah, it's kind of the easy, popular answer, but it's a good answer, so why not?
I mean, I love the 90s trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
And I even feel like there's some throwbacks to this or callbacks to this in the 90s trilogy where Gamera does lose a hand. Spoiler. And I see something like that or think about something like that and think, yeah, I could see maybe that being a reference to what happens to Gamera in this one. And it's just pretty darn cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first of the 90s ones, Guardian of the Universe, is almost a remake of this.
Yeah, true.
It's funny, at one point they were talking about making another movie that fell through because Daiei went bankrupt. But it was going to be called Gamera versus Gera Sharp, and it was going to be this big King Cobra type thing, which on the tiny budgets they worked with, it would have been really interesting to see how they could work out an entire marionette snake, because you can't really do a snake as a guy in a suit, so presumably it would have been a marionette thing like Manda in Atragon, but with next to no money. And that was I remember they had talked about that as being Gamera's iconic foe. This is going to be our King Ghidorah to Godzilla. And I was thinking, well, you already have that. Everyone loves Gyaos. That's Gamera's iconic foe. You don't need another one.
Yeah. No, it's Gyaos. Gyaos is the guy.
Well, you were mentioning the comic relief guys, the Abbott and Costello dudes. Yukitaro Hotaru, who played Hachiko, the skinny one, he was the inspiration for Yukijiro Hotaru, who played Inspector Osako in the Heisei Gamera movies. He wanted to be that guy. That's why he wanted to be in the 90s Gamera movies, and that's who he kind of based his character around. Is that acting style and that character.
Huh, okay. I can see that. That works.
And I didn't write down the other one's name, but he had a very tragic history. Like, he killed himself not too long after this movie came out. Not to bring things down too far, because he got typecast and made fun of a whole lot. And yeah, that's probably why I didn't write it down. I didn't want to dwell on it, but then it popped into my head while I was reading the thing with the other guy. So
yeah, that's too bad. Well, I mean, he gave us this, and it's enjoyable. I can't think of anything about this movie. Like, there's never a moment where I was like, move on. Get to the giant monsters. I want to see more. Because I was on board, man. Even the stuff where it's just on the little kid.
Yeah.
It still felt so sincere and enjoyable that I never once found myself tempted to reach over and grab the remote and fast forward a little bit. I think overall it's a really solid movie. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah, well, I mean, precocious little children are such a trope in Gamera movies and other Japanese sci-fi movies as well. Yeah, I think the kids in the little shorts, and that's another Mystery Science Theater thing. But this kid is a really good actor. He never, I mean, of course, there are scenes where he pitches a fit and, acts like a kid, but it never comes off to me as annoying. He's not the obnoxious little Kenny stereotype. Like, I think he's a really good actor. And apparently he looked so much like Noriaki Yuasa that people thought he was his son. He's like, oh, this is nepotism. You hired your kid. And Yuasa's like, no, we're just both short and chubby. Leave us alone. It's not that.
Even moments where the kid is helpless, he doesn't come across as annoying, which I think is a fine line sometimes with a lot of kid actors and a lot of especially lower budget movies. When he's stuck and the reporter who he is guided on the secret trail leaves him, abandons him, and he starts screaming, Mister, help me. Or when he gets stuck under the rocks and he just starts screaming for his sister to help him. It's not annoying. It's like, oh my gosh, this kid, somebody save that kid, you know?
Well, and the scene where he's defending his grandfather, I think that's really touching too, because there's a scene towards the end of the movie where, the grandfather has been encouraging the farmers to hold out against the government for more money, because that part of the Japanese eminent domain thing is they have to pay you a fair price for your land. They can't just, it's not quite as brutal as it is in America, where they can basically just make you homeless with the click of a pen. And so he's trying to convince them to hold out for more money, and then they're all mad at him because this monster showed up and ruined their property value. Nobody wants to drive a car through a forest where there's a giant bat creature that is going to eat them, right? So suddenly the government's like, yeah, you know what? Your land isn't really worth that anymore. So all the farmers come to Grandpa's house to yell at him for making them hold out too long, and they've lost everything. And Eiichi comes out with an armful of his toys, model airplanes and coloring books and things, and just screaming, Grandpa was just trying to help you, you greedy farmers. He was trying to make things better for everyone. You leave my grandpa alone. And he's throwing all the toys at him. And the sister comes out and grabs him and drags him back inside, kicking and screaming. And the grandfather is kind of, looking apologetic, like, uh-oh, I'm really in trouble now. And then all the farmers just kind of quit arguing. And they kind of look at each other sheepishly. And there's one guy who's like, yeah, but you, and then the rest of them just grab him like, no, dude, just shut it. We need to go. We screwed up. So it's this sweet moment of this kid defending his grandfather, this real pure reaction to, he doesn't understand all the economic stuff that's going on. He just sees a bunch of men being mean to his granddad, who he loves. And it kind of makes all the farmers realize that they're being petty. And yeah, it's a cool scene. I like it.
I'm trying to think of anything else that I want to mention about the movie, but I mean, I think we've covered most of it. Any other final points or final words on Gamera before we start wrapping up?
Well, yeah, let's see. I've got a few things. We can skip over some of this, but one thing that I figured you'd want to talk about is the music.
Let it be known, listeners, I've been actually making a concerted effort not to geek out about the music too much because, well, I do it a lot. And I don't know if people are tired of it or not.
No,
but
music is always worth geeking out over.
Okay, good, because I do love the music. The Gamera soundtracks, I don't know if there's ever been released, if there's ever a definitive...
There have not,
soundtrack albums. I know there've been some good Godzilla soundtrack albums over the years, but Gamera music is kind of harder to come by, isn't it?
I mean, you could probably find them on YouTube or something. I haven't really looked, but... So Waxwork Records did that amazing Showa era Godzilla box set last year, and they've been putting out other ones too, like the King Kong Escapes, War of the Gargantuas. Mondo has been doing some. They're doing Rodan. Matango's coming out. They just put out Mothra, which is awesome. But yeah, so there's an official Waxwork Records fan group that's moderated by some of the people who work for Waxwork. And every once in a while they'll say, so, hey guys, what would you like to see Waxwork Records put out next? What should our next release be? And I always just answer with that gif of Gamera from Giron, where he's spinning around the bar doing the, because it needs to happen. And I bet it's not nearly as expensive to license as the Godzilla stuff.
Yeah.
So the composer of this score for this one, which not only is my favorite Showa Gamera movie, I should have specified, this is my favorite Gamera movie overall. The Heisei trilogy are, especially 2 and 3, Gamera vs. Legion and Gamera vs. Iris. Those are the best kaiju movies ever made, period. End of story.
Oh, okay.
But as far as Showa movies go, Gyaos is tops. And it's also my favorite score. And the composer for this one was Tadashi Yamauchi, who only did this and the first Gamera. He didn't do a lot of kaiju stuff, but he had a pretty decent career composing for other kinds of films. He was originally going to be a violinist, but his hands were injured. He got conscripted into World War II, as so many did. And his hands were injured. They were ruined, essentially. He couldn't be, I mean, he could still use them, but not to the point of being able to be a concert violinist. So his war experiences, a lot like Ishiro Honda's, made him an ardent pacifist. So his whole life spoke out against war, against violence. He's an awesome guy, both composer and just person. His older brother was Akira Yamauchi, who played Dr. Yano in Godzilla vs. Hedorah. So one day, and Ifukube did not do the score for Godzilla vs. Hedorah, but at some point on a on a train ride or something, he ran into Akira Ifukube and asked the great composer to mentor his little brother. He said, look, my brother wanted to be a musician. He can't really do that anymore, but he still wants to write. Please take him under your wing. And so that is what happened. So the composer for Gamera versus Gyaos, Tadashi Yamauchi, was mentored by Akira Ifukube, and you can really hear that influence in this score, I think.
I agree. It does have a very Toho-ish sound, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. And while you were kind of sharing that with us, I was hopping around places like soundtrackcollector.com and all that, see if there's ever been a release anywhere in the world for some good Gamera music. And it looks like Tokuma Records at one point in the 90s put out a 3 CD box set, but I don't know how much of that is classic Gamera versus the Heisei era.
Okay.
It looks like it might be more Heisei, but I would love to get my hands on a collection of the Gamera film scores because it's so good.
Yeah. And Ko Otani's stuff for the Heisei movies are great too. I actually got to see that in concert one year at G-Fest. They were...
Oh, were you there?
Yeah, I was there for all 3 of those concerts, and they were amazing.
Yeah, so G-Fest, what's the guy's name? John Santos? Is that the person who puts that together?
John DeSantis, yeah.
John DeSantis, excuse me. So John DeSantis has spearheaded a few Kickstarter campaigns over the years to put on a concert, just pulling in music from the various kaiju films that he loves and then performs them live at G-Fest, and then eventually a CD gets released, and I believe there's some YouTube videos as well out there of this, and it's so cool to see these to see this music get treated in such a phenomenal, loving way.
Yeah, they were wild.
I don't know much about the Japanese film industry or the film machine from the 50s, from the 60s, so I don't know as much about that as I would say like the American stuff. But I imagine that the music probably wasn't treated as well as the music was treated over here for a lot of these films, where a lot of stock music was used and that sort of thing. So that when the Gamera films or the Godzilla films of this era get treated with such respect, I love it. It makes me very happy, and I listen to it whenever I can.
The year that they did the Ko Otani music, Ko was actually there as a guest.
Yes.
And apparently after the show, he went up to John DeSantis and said, I can't remember if it was for one of the Gamera suites or if it was for the music from GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters, All Out Attack. But for one of those, he told John after the show that he thought John's arrangement of the music was better than his own. So he was just over the moon about that.
Oh, man. How cool is that, dude? Just how cool is that? Oh, man. Never been to G-Fest. Someday.
Yeah, I was so bummed to find out that Mark was there. I had no idea. I would have said hi to him because I was there this year too. It was great to be back after the hiatus, but
I have a feeling Mark's going to be there again.
Well, good. Well, we'll have to.
I imagine
we'll have to meet up next time.
Yeah, I can't imagine Mark's the kind of guy that's going to stay away from G-Fest.
Once you go, you can't.
So,
and it's a lot like, you talk about Monster Bash. It's the same thing where the first time or two that you go, you're there for the dealer room and for the guests and the panels and everything else. And after a while, it's a reunion. It's the one time a year you get to see all your friends in meet space that you otherwise have to just talk to online all the time.
Yeah. Someday I'll get back. Someday I'll get back to all of it because I miss it. I miss meeting people and hanging out with people and that sort of thing. And someday I'll get back. But in the meantime, I'll have to live vicariously through folks like Mark or you or anybody else who goes to these events. When Mark told me that even though it's called G-Fest and it's inspired by Godzilla, that Ultraman gets a good showing at G-Fest, I'm imagining Gamera does as well.
The year was 2015, when it was Gamera's anniversary year. They had a little more Gamera stuff there. Most of the time, it's more represented in like the dealer room. Not so much in the guests, but one more fun little bit of trivia. Kojiro Hongo, we did talk
Yes.
any about him. He's the head of the construction company. He was a literature student. He was a very serious, dramatic actor. And when Daiei went all in on Gamera versus Baragon, because the first movie was very successful, so they decided to make a more adult, grown-up Gamera movie. That was the second one. They had no little kid stuff in it. They spent like 2 or 3 times as much on that as they did any other movie they'd ever done. And they wanted him because he was an A-list dramatic actor, kind of like when they got Bryan Cranston to be in Godzilla 2014 when he was just hot off Breaking Bad. And he didn't want to do it. And he had a friend who was a doctor who he basically had his doctor friend write him a note saying he was too sick to come out and play with the monsters. And it backfired because the studio wanted him so bad. They said, that's fine. We'll hold up production until you're better. So we went, oh, crap. Stop doing this.
A doctor's note to stay out of it. You'd have to write, oh, man, I want a doctor's note to put me in the monster movies. What are you talking about?
Right?
Oh man. Well, our gain, I guess, you know?
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about Gamera with me here. Like I said, I always feel a little almost imposter syndrome-y about talking about kaiju films on the show, because I just don't have the experience. I don't have the depth of knowledge that other people do. So I appreciate you taking the time to, you know, hold my neophyte kaiju loving hand.
Well, hey, I'm
and
happy
walk
to
me
be
through
here.
some of this
And
stuff. So
I'm far from an expert. You know, I have my friend Kyle Bird, who does the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. If he even listens to this, he'll probably send me an angry text saying I got a bunch of stuff wrong. So, you know, I'm no expert either, but I've been a diehard fan of this stuff since I was like 4 years old, and my mom rented Godzilla 1985 for me for the first time. So I'm always happy to talk about kaiju or any other kind of monster, really.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is like folks like us, I feel like you don't have the hesitation that I do, because I love all the other stuff and you love all the other stuff. You're like, yeah, my kaiju, this is part of it. So you're a more well-rounded monster kid than I am, I guess is what I'm getting at. So
well,
oh man, good stuff. So what have you got coming up? Can you talk? You see, you've got this article about the Blob coming up in Scream Magazine.
Yeah, that's the one I'm writing now. I don't know when. They don't necessarily publish the stuff as they get it. So they push the John Carpenter thing right up to the top because it's John Carpenter and that's going to sell issues, right? But they've had, like that, I mentioned I'd written an article about Blackula. That was like the second thing I ever wrote for them, and it still hasn't come out yet. I did this great interview with Nick Maley, the guy who built Yoda for Empire Strikes Back, and a bunch of other stuff. I talked to him about his work on Life Force, the Toby Hooper movie. And so I have this, it's like, and it's a massive interview. Like, it's like almost 3 times as long as my normal articles, because he was very, very talkative, and it was an awesome interview. And that it'll come out because that was one of the movies they requested. I just don't know when. So yeah, it's hard to say when this stuff will come out. But issue 74, which is out right now, you can order it at screamhorrormag.com, or Barnes and Noble carries Scream. But it takes a little while because they're published in the UK, so it takes a little while for things to get over here. So you might not see it on the Barnes and Noble shelves until September. But you can get it, or ask your local comic book shop. Better yet, forget Barnes and Noble. Scratch the corporate guys. Go talk to your local comic book shop. Tell them to carry Scream Magazine.
There you go. No, it's you laugh, but seriously, it's important.
Yeah, no, for sure. And now back to shilling the corporate stuff. I have an author page on Amazon where I've got some short stories out in a couple of anthologies. And then I self-published one that you can read for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. I still get a couple of pennies from Jeff Bezos if you do that. And then the thing I'm almost more excited about than having talked to John Carpenter is I got to do my first bit of voiceover work recently. That's something I've always dreamed of doing. I've just never really known how to get into it, but it's good to have friends in the right places. So my buddy Andrew has this amazing, I'm assuming some of your listeners like me are metalheads. He has this death metal band called Coagulate. They're out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the theme of the band is Brian Lumley's Necroscope novels, which, if you've never read those, are like the best vampire literature ever. They're super creative, super weird, gory, crazy, kind of a mix of like the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft meets the blood and thunder of Robert E. Howard, with a healthy dash of like 1970s exploitation movie sleaze.
And Lumley obviously is part of the Lovecraft community. I've met the man a couple of times over the years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And chatted with him, and he knows his Lovecraft. He's a, whatever. But Necroscope, it's, I'm going to say this word, and I don't mean it derisively because I know it does have a little bit of weight to it, but it's like a splatterpunk vampire story, and it's really good if you're into that kind of thing.
So Andrew's band Coagulate, all the songs are relating to the lore of Necroscope, and they released a rehearsal demo, which is basically a live all-at-once recording rather than a fully produced studio kind of thing, through a label called Sewer Rot Records. And they have a song about a character called Vasagai the Suck. And he had a couple of sections that he wanted some words read, and hit me up and said, "Hey, you have a voice to read horror stuff. Come read this stuff on my song."
You have a voice. Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yeah. You do have a great voice, dude.
Well, thank you.
So that's awesome.
And that being said, if anyone else wants to hire me to read any horror stuff for them, I'm your man. I'm available.
Right on. All right. So we'll make sure there's links to Scream Magazine. We'll make sure there's links to your author page on Amazon. And if there's anything else that you are attached to that has a website, let me know, and I'll make sure there's a link to that as well in the show notes over at monsterkidradio.net. And, of course, follow the affiliate links to order your own copy of this movie, if it's still available. I think it's still in print, over on Amazon as well. And it just scrapes a couple of cents off the top of Jeff Bezos' paycheck and dumps it into my Monster Kid coffers. So that'll help out as well. Brian, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me back.
I appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, I appreciate people being patient with me when it comes to the kaiju stuff. I've had a lot of talk from people wanting me to do more kaiju on the show. I never feel qualified. So when I've got somebody like Brian on the show, I suddenly feel a little bit more in my element. So thanks for helping me with that.
My pleasure. I'm happy to come back anytime. God, and I was just...
Very cool, man.
I had like a page left of notes and just little bits of trivia and things like, we don't need to keep talking about this stuff. We've been over an hour. And then I found one that I just remembered, like, this was something I wanted to make a point to put in because it's such a good story, but we get to...
No, that's cool. That's cool. No. I haven't stopped yet. Editing, dude. What do you got?
Okay. So the production budget for the effects was around $160,000. That's not counting the actors' salaries, the promotional materials, the publicity, all that kind of stuff. This is just to, the practical side of things. There was a studio accountant keeping track of each time they fired Gamera's leg rockets, which cost 12,000. It cost 12,000 yen a pop, or around $33 American at the time. And Gyaos's cutting beam cost like $1,000 every time they had to animate it. So they had to be very sure the shots were lined up right and didn't screw anything up. But a few years ago at G-Fest, the suit builder Keizo Mirase was there, and he was primarily a Toho guy. He built King Ghidorah, he worked on Mothra, he built the Varan the Unbelievable suit. But
I love that.
But because Toho was the only studio that had like a kind of in-house effects team, others, they would kind of farm their work out to other studios sometimes. So when Dai needed a Gamera movie, they didn't have that many people to work on it. So they would get some people from Toho, and Keizo Mirase was one of them. And he was telling this amazing story. Later Gamera films cut the spinning, when Gamera has all 4 rockets burning and it's twirling like a UFO, and just had him fly with his back legs, with his head and front and arms still out. Well, they were probably thrilled to, and that was a budgetary thing because those rocket firing cost so much, but they were probably thrilled to be able to get rid of that spinning effect, because this, my favorite story Mirase told was when they would do that spinning thing, you can imagine how complex the system of wires was to make that happen, to be able be able to pilot that shell and move it through the air at the same time. And it was quite heavy. And those flame jets were really hot. And they had a tendency to burn through the piano wire and send that shell crashing down into the city set, knocking all the buildings over, costing them tons of money and time to have to, stop filming for a day or two to completely rebuild the sets.
Oh, no. Oh, man. That's something about these movies that I am in awe of. And I know when you're hired to work on a movie like this and you're told you're going to build a city, you know that cityscape's going to get destroyed. You just know. So you go into it trying not to have that attachment, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine being hired to work on something like that. And you spend months building something so that it can be destroyed in 30 seconds on screen.
Especially when it's destroyed by accident.
Oh, that's the worst. Man. There's a question in the Classic 5 about, if you could hang out on set for a day or whatever on a monster movie, what would it be? And just hanging out on a kaiju set before Godzilla or Gamera turns up.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that. I would love to have that experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. I know we're doing this as an insert, but are you aware of any really good resource, like books or even online resources that really get into the special effects and the history of that? I know there've been some great Tsuburaya books over the years, but he didn't work on Gamera. So are you aware of any good places online or even in text for people to go learn more about this stuff?
As far as non-Tsuburaya stuff, there's one, oh God, I'm trying to remember. I keep seeing ads for it on Amazon, on my Facebook. It pops up. It's called Godfathers of Japanese Special Effects or something like that. Of course, I see it all the time and I keep needing to buy it. And the one time I need to think of what it's called, I'm totally drawing a blank. But I want to say it's by Otaku Books, something like that.
Japanese Special Effects Cinema, Godfathers of Tokusatsu?
Yes, that's the one. I don't have it yet, but it's apparently a fairly recent thing. And like I said, I see ads for it popping up a lot. And I've heard from some people who have it say, not a lot of photographs, oddly, but good information. So I would, without having read it, I guess I recommend that one. But yeah, there's not a lot of stuff that covers the obviously Tsuburaya is the big one, and there's the August Rigoni book. But the commentary tracks on the Arrow Video Gamera set are amazing. I got a lot of the information that we talked about today from listening to the Stuart Galbraith's commentary track.
Right on.
Return of the Giant Monsters. Return of the Giant Monsters. Return of the Giant Monsters.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the show. This is, of course, the end of the episode. But Monster Kid Radio doesn't have to end right now because we're all over the internet. Our Facebook page, our Facebook group, our Twitter, our Discord, our Patreon, our Reddit. We're all over the place. Head over to monsterkidradio.net to check out links to all of that if you want to be part of the Monster Kid party between episodes. Or join us on Twitch. Like I said, on Saturday, we show movies all bloody day. On Tuesday, we show movies as well. It's a good time, and it's free. There's a great chat going on. It's the only time I'm going to encourage you to talk during a movie. Other things coming up on Monster Kid Radio. Well, next week, we've got kaijuqueeeen. She's going to be joining us here on the show. kaijuqueeeen is very involved in the Twitch channel. She's always in the chat, chatting it up with us, having a good time. But we're going to have her on the show proper. We're going to learn about her origin story as a monster kid, as well as some local events that she's gone to in her neck of the woods that monster kids might be interested in learning about. So we've got that coming up next week. The HP Lovecraft Film Festival is happening next month, and while it's not official yet, as I still need to submit my application, I'm not necessarily a guest, but I'm going to try to get to that thing. I'm going to try to be there. We've got PDX Scaregrounds happening all throughout October. It starts at the end of September, actually, which is one of Portland's premier haunted house events. And my girlfriend Beth is one of the managers there, so I want to promote that as well. Go to any of these events. Let them know that Monster Kid Radio sent you, and then call in and let us know how it was. I'd love to hear about it. All sorts of cool stuff coming up. I think there's going to be a special announcement about some special episodes of Monster Kid Radio coming up here very soon. Very soon. So stay tuned for that. Best way to stay tuned is to subscribe to the podcast or even subscribe to our YouTube channel, because the YouTube channel also has the episodes of Monster Kid Radio. I really want to get this episode out, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and just thank you for being here and remind you that Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio, LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio, LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Savage Season. That is by the band, the Italian surf band, the Bradipos 4. The Bradipos 4 can be found on Bandcamp, on the High Tide Recordings Bandcamp page. Go check them out. And like I said earlier, let them know that Monster Kid Radio sent you. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.